The air was cool and fresh as Amara stepped out early in the morning. On her head was a big tray filled with ripe bananas. It was Wednesday, the day she hated the most. While other children wore clean school uniforms and carried their books, Amara had to walk the streets, selling bananas. Her aunt, Madame Elizabeth, had warned her before she left the house. "If you don't sell everything, don't come back asking for food." Amara was only 10 years old. She wanted to cry, but she held back the tears. She remembered how she had been brought from the village with promises of going to school and living a better life. But since she came, all she did was work. Her aunt shouted at her all the time and sometimes beat her. She walked slowly, calling out to people to buy. "Sweet banana. Come and buy sweet banana," she shouted. Some people ignored her. Others looked at the bananas but didn't buy. Her neck hurt from the weight of the tray, but she kept moving. Not far from where she walked, a black car was parked by the side of the road. 2 young men were inside, watching her. "She's perfect," one of them whispered. They waited and watched. Amara turned into a quiet street, hoping someone there would buy. She didn't know the car had started moving behind her, slowly and quietly. "Let's get her at the next corner," the driver said. As Amara walked on, she suddenly felt strange. She noticed the car following her. Her heart started beating fast. Something didn't feel right. She stopped walking for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should she run? Or was she just imagining things? "Little girl, come here," a man says. She looks and sees 2 men standing beside a car. They are smiling at her, which makes her feel a little safe. One of the men is tall. He tells her that they want to buy everything she is selling. Amara is surprised and happy. She cannot believe it. If they buy everything, she can go home early. She will also have money to buy food. She quickly agrees and says, "Yes, sir." Then the shorter man speaks. He says they have the money in the car. He asks Amara to come with them so they can pay her. Amara feels unsure. A small voice inside her head tells her something is wrong. She feels like she should run away. But she is too tired, too hungry, and too desperate. She decides to trust them and walks closer. As soon as she gets near, everything changes very fast. The tall man grabs her by the waist. She tries to scream and fight, but the other man puts a cloth over her nose and mouth. The cloth smells strange, sweet but bad. She starts to feel dizzy. Her body becomes weak. She cannot move or fight anymore. Amara's eyes close slowly. She is scared but cannot do anything. Soon everything turns dark. She loses all her strength and falls into deep sleep. Amara woke up to the loud sound of a car engine. Her head hurt badly, her mouth was very dry, and something rough was touching her skin. She realized she had been tied up. Her hands and feet were tied with rope, and her mouth was covered with tape. She couldn't speak or move freely. The car was moving quickly on the road. Amara tried to move or make noise, but the 2 men in the car were too busy talking. One of them laughed and said, "That was too easy." The other said that their boss would pay a lot of money because Amara was young. When Amara heard this, she felt sick and scared. She didn't know where they were taking her, but she knew it was somewhere bad. Even though she was afraid, Amara didn't give up. She started moving her wrists, trying to loosen the rope. It was very tight, but she kept trying. Then the car slowed down. One of the men said there was a police checkpoint ahead. Amara's heart began to race. Maybe this was her chance to escape. She started struggling more, hoping someone would see her. If the police noticed her, they might stop the car and save her. But before she could do much, one of the men pushed her down and held her still. He told her to stay quiet or she would regret it. His voice was angry and scary. Tears filled Amara's eyes, but she didn't stop trying. She was brave. She didn't want to give up hope. Even though she was tied up and scared, she kept trying to make noise and move. She wanted the police to see her and help her. The car carrying Amara stopped at a police checkpoint. A police officer walked up to the car and said it was a normal search. He asked the men to step out. But one of the men leaned out of the window and smiled. showing a big bundle of cash. "We're in a hurry, officer." "No need to waste time," the man said. The officer paused. In that area, money often spoke louder than rules. He looked at the other officers nearby, unsure of what to do. One of his colleagues gave a small nod, agreeing to take the bribe. "Go ahead," the officer said, stepping aside to let the car pass. Amara's heart dropped. Her one chance of being rescued was slipping away. But just as the car started to move, a new voice shouted, "Stop!" A tall officer with sharp, serious eyes walked up. He told them again to stop the engine. His voice was firm. The men in the car looked nervous. "We already settled it," the driver said, trying to sound confident. "Step out," the tall officer repeated, this time resting his hand on his gun. The men hesitated, but they had no choice. The officer then pointed to the first officer who had taken the bribe. "Ooh. Open the trunk." The driver was angry and cursed quietly. But slowly he opened the trunk. Inside was Amara. She was tied up and weak, but her eyes were wide with fear. The officers were shocked. For a moment everything was silent. Then all at once chaos broke out. People shouted, more officers ran over, and the men who had kidnapped Amara tried to escape, but it was too late. The brave officer had exposed the truth. Justice had won, even though corruption almost let the criminals go free. The moment the trunk opened and Amara was found, everything moved quickly. The tall officer's voice boomed. "Get out!" It was strong and full of power like thunder in the sky. The two kidnappers panicked. They knew they were caught and tried to run away. But the police officers were ready. They moved fast and tackled both men to the ground before they could escape. In just a few seconds, both men were handcuffed. They could no longer hurt anyone. Justice had caught up with them. While the other officers handled the kidnappers, one of them gently reached for Amara. Her body was weak, and her eyes were tired and blurry. But she could feel someone untying the ropes around her hands and feet. "You're safe now," the officer told her in a soft voice. As soon as the ropes came off and she realized she was no longer in danger, Amara's body gave up. All the fear, pain, and tiredness came crashing down at once. She collapsed, but this time it was not from fear. It was from relief. She was safe. Finally. This short chapter shows the power of true justice. The bad men who tried to harm a young girl were stopped. They thought they could escape by paying off the police, but they were wrong. One honest officer refused to let them go and saved a life because of it. Amara, who had suffered so much, was now free. Her bravery helped her survive, and the truth finally came to light. This chapter also shows the importance of good people in powerful places. Just one honest officer made a big difference and changed the story from a tragedy to a rescue. After Amara was rescued, the news spread quickly. People in the community began to talk. They whispered about what had really been going on. Everyone was shocked to learn that Madame Elizabeth, the woman who was supposed to care for Amara, had been forcing her to sell goods on the street instead of sending her to school. People were angry. How could a woman treat a young girl like that? Many had seen Amara hawking but didn't know the full story. Now the truth was out in the open. Soon the authorities went to Madame Elizabeth's house. They didn't wait. They told her, "You are under arrest for child abuse." Madame Elizabeth started shouting and begging them to let her go. But it was too late. Her lies had been uncovered, and justice had come for her too. While that was happening, Amara was in a hospital. She was safe now. Her wounds were being treated, and kind people were around her. Doctors, nurses, and police officers came to check on her and make sure she was okay. One officer came close and smiled at her. "You're a brave girl," he said. "Because you were strong and didn't give up, the government has decided to give you a scholarship." Amara couldn't believe it. After everything she had been through, the hunger, the fear, the kidnapping, something good was finally happening. She didn't have to hawk on the streets anymore. She could go to school, learn, and dream of a better life. For the first time in a very long while, Amara smiled. It was a real smile, full of hope and peace. She was no longer a victim. She was free. Her story had moved from pain to power, from fear to freedom.